Coming to you live from deep within a dry and windy and also sometimes sunny radioactive mainland. We are the survivors of the alt-right apocalypse, the few, the brave, the bitchy, once more wading into battle against the froggy hordes with Rantzerker number 91. Rebel Media sign the petition, end parentheses, end parentheses, end parentheses.
I see what you did. I see what you did there, Alison.
Do you see what I did there?
It's okay. It's the Jewy Jews.
Yeah, well, yes, definitely the anti-Semitic ones as well. That makes them like double Jews.
I know. It's this whole thing is just getting bizarre. But
it is getting really freaking bizarre. So today we are touching the poop. This would be the poop at the center of the controversy. So we were going to touch it. We're going to get right in there. We're going to get, you know, like that scene in Jurassic Park.
Yep.
With the dinosaur
just
mound.
Elbow deep.
Just elbow deep.
Oh yeah.
This poop. Okay.
We're looking for parasites and anomalies.
Yep, parasites and anomalies.
And partially digested grass.
Indeed. Okay.
All right.
All right, Brian,
so
take it away.
Okay, we're going to look at this article.
Yes.
A fight over a 4-bedroom house. The Rebel Media meltdown and the full recording at the center of the controversy by Sean Craig. With politicians including conservative heavyweights Andrew Scheer and Brian Jean, swearing off appearances and a raft of exits by prominent contributors, Ezra Levant's far-right video and commentary network The Rebel spent the last week in damage control, trying to distance itself from the extremist alt-right movement whose values many have alleged the site's content too often sympathized with.
I don't know what they mean anymore by extremist or far right. Like if you watched my coverage of the media coverage of Boston, you'll notice that CNN and corporate media essentially, well, they didn't show them at all. They just essentially, before the rally, they called them a bunch of racists and bigots, and then basically caused a couple tens of thousands of people to descend on this gazebo in the center of a square, and inside the gazebo were the horrible, horrible, horrible Nazis. And
like an Indian American dude, and I was actually watching him. He was like, "I don't know any of you." Right? Like I don't know any of you. I don't know what you believe.
No. He said though nobody knows. The media doesn't know who they are. The media told him, "Why are you associating with these people?" When the media didn't actually even know who they were. And just so you know, CNN got a bunch of hippies from the Church of Weed, the aforementioned Indian American senatorial candidate, and free speech rights activists, and maybe some environmentalists against GMOs. They got them labeled Nazis.
Yeah.
At this point in time, I don't know what the fuck somebody means when they say the word Nazi, especially corporate media. For all I know, it's just some innocent people that the only differentiation now between a Nazi and not a Nazi is whether corporate media says you're a Nazi. That's it.
No, the differentiation between a Nazi and not a Nazi is if you're okay with suppressing some speech, you're not a Nazi, and if you're not okay with suppressing speech, you are a Nazi. Is maybe what it is. I don't like. It seems to me like one of the things that has come from me uploading my interview with Chris Cantwell the other night is a lot of the people who vehemently disagree with me having given him a platform are every bit as kind of antagonistic, black and white thinkers. My side can do no wrong. Everybody else is the devil, right? As they are portraying Nazis to be, right? Like they're saying Nazis say blacks are the devil, right? Even sometimes when they don't, right? But they see certain groups of people or certain people, mainly people with money, right, as the absolute freaking devil, and those people need to be destroyed. And it's just like, I don't like.
Stan, okay, I just want to pull someone out from the chat. Stan Ulch says, disagreeing with anyone on the left makes one a pro forma Nazi. Well, now it's just allowing anyone on the right to speak, or to speak in conjunction with anyone on the right is now making you a Nazi. So you could be left of Bernie, but the fact that you might entertain or listen to somebody that corporate media has said you should not now makes you a Nazi as well.
Well, so, I think we all need to take up smoking, because Hitler was absolutely anti-smoking. He had government-sponsored anti-smoking campaigns. He was one of the first people in positions of power to sound the alarm as to the negative health effects of smoking, right? And we shouldn't listen to him.
No.
Or anybody who agrees with him.
Wasn't he also a vegetarian?
Yeah, I mean, he had some real serious issues with, like, he had a massive disgust reflex, and so, I mean, he bathed several times a day, and he was sort of obsessive-compulsive about hand-washing and what he ate, and he didn't want to put anything unclean in his body, and, I mean, like, I wouldn't go so far as to say that, you know, he was a advocate of healthy living. He took things a little bit far, because he was sick in the head, I think.
Yeah. You think?
Well, so is PETA, but nobody's calling them Nazis.
Okay. I just do you want to just show this, because this is the context. Like, if you show that video, it just sets everything up. Why it's important to talk to people labeled Nazis, because you don't actually know if they genuinely have any even white supremacist beliefs, or if they're not Jewish.
Do you want me to play this first video then?
Yeah, maybe just play it. Like, not the first video, not the Jewish video, but the one, the other one? The other one. Parentheses.
Over the weekend, tens of thousands of Bostonians assembled to call these people,
"We are here for love, love, love,"
Nazis.
This is CNN's coverage of the counter-protest march in Boston. You'll notice as you watch CNN's coverage that there is sort of a glaring omission. They don't show any footage of the free speech rally. So I'm going to correct that omission. Let's call it an omission or an oversight.
Know that we are here for the right reasons. We are here for love, love, love. Thank you. Woo! Who's next?
Ho ho! White supremacy's got to go! Hey hey! Ho ho! White supremacy's got to go! Hey hey!
And let me tell you that they tried to prevent me from coming here, as you may have heard in the media. They asked me why I associated myself with all of you guys, even though they have no idea who you or we are.
We saw a couple of incidents where people were running and police were coming forward with their riot gear. But for the most part, this has been a peaceful rally, especially when you consider the numbers of people who showed up here.
Where are the neo-Nazis? Show me one. Show me one.
Okay, it's pretty much over now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a thing that happened.
That's pretty fucking hilarious. Scary and hilarious. But
yeah, it's to the point where you can't really respond to it very well, can you? It's just it doesn't fucking matter. It doesn't fucking matter what you believe, what you think. If corporate media calls you a Nazi, you're a Nazi. So my ultimate conclusion from that experience of watching the Boston rally and seeing the CNN coverage is that one of the main reasons, and possibly the most important reason, to protect the free speech of quote-unquote Nazis is, what if they aren't Nazis? And if they can't speak, you'll never know. If these people hadn't recorded themselves And if you relied on the corporate media's determination of their identity, you would have thought they were bigots and racists and Nazis. But they weren't. And their free speech was the only thing that saved them from the fate of being identified with Nazism. And if we silence all the quote-unquote Nazis and trust our corporate... And this is the thing. We're going to trust, absolutely put all of our trust in corporate media to tell us who the Nazis are. And when corporate media has identified the Nazis, we'll just turn off our brains and tell them they can't speak. They can't speak for themselves because Nazis deserve the consequences of their quote-unquote free speech.
Yeah.
How do we determine they're not Nazis?
Well, turn off our brains and storm the fucking gazebo.
Yeah.
Too, right? Like that's really what worries me, is given the violence that's been going on, on the control left, or what Trump called the alt left. I'm actually surprised that there wasn't, beatings or deaths or whatever.
They escorted the free speech folks out during the chaos, like hours before the counter protesters, finally sort of dispersed. So
what gets me is
a long time to disperse, and they had clashes with the police, the counter protesters,
and they clashed with each other. So they got into fights with themselves and the police.
Well, what I found interesting is because, like, in Charlottesville, the police, the city was forced to uphold the permit for the peaceful demonstration, and according to Chris, and I tend to believe him, right, about half of these demonstrators, right, I'm going to call them the alt-right demonstrators, about half of them they had firearms.
At Charlottesville?
About half of them, at Charlottesville, about half of them had firearms. And the police were supposed to cordon off the entire park, but they didn't. They cordoned off 3 edges of a tiny little corner of it and allowed Antifa and all of the control left counter-protesters to essentially line up on the south side of this little area where this rally was supposed to be taking place, this peaceful demonstration. And they had to walk apparently a gauntlet of these people just to get into where they were going to give their speeches and have their little vigil or whatever, right?
Okay. Just I need to address something, because someone named Sea-Dog at Not a Sea-Dog on Twitter says, point of order, the cops actually did not permit media to film the rally, only the protesters. Okay, well, here's the problem, Sea-Dog. I actually watched as the media selectively took footage that people had uploaded. You remember that footage of the gazebo from I think it was probably a building around the Commons? That was actually not actually media footage. That was footage by just a citizen taking camera footage of the event. And they requested that footage, but they did not request the footage from Shiva. So I call bullshit on your point of order. If they had been completely neutral about this whole thing, and if they had been honest, they would have also asked Shiva if they could use his video from the event, and they did not. And I watched as they selectively took different people's video and did not ask Shiva for his video, or for the video of his volunteer who was videotaping his, or a video of the other people who were videotaping the free speech rally in the gazebo. This is a huge oversight by CNN and other corporate media to selectively choose which citizens they're going to take video from and then completely omit any of the citizen video from the gazebo. So no, it doesn't matter that the police didn't let them go in and film, because they were taking film from people, from citizens who were filming the actual counter protest. So it still is an issue of selective editing of reality.
Yeah, no, and if that footage was online, CNN could have grabbed it because it's fair use.
Well, it's not just fair use. I literally saw them asking.
But
other people for their footage.
But they wouldn't have to ask. If they wanted the footage, if they asked for the footage and it was refused, they could have just taken it and used it.
Point is that they had the opportunity to use the footage and they chose not to use the footage.
Well, and what gets, like, here's the thing too, right? I really am starting to feel manipulated, because it was V that first sort of described, V on YouTube, described the situation in Charlottesville where the police were essentially on the long north edge and the shorter south, east and west edges. And Antifa and all of the counter-protesters who were armed with, urine and feces and bottles of cement and rocks and clubs and shit, right? They went there for a fight. They were lined up all along the south edge of that. And when the police were like, okay, it's, demonstration's over, let's all go home, what did they do? They began to move south and push these heavily armed alt-right demonstrators who had a permit right into Antifa and the other left-wing groups who were also armed, right? So I'm sorry, but that's orchestrating a violent confrontation. Instead of essentially opening up ranks and saying, come out through the north, right? They pushed them south.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I can only imagine that's because that is because they were taking a political position, right? To give these freaking alt-righters what they deserve without actually taking, police weapons to them, right? Give them what they deserve, give them a beating, right? Without actually having to be the one doing it, right? Because apparently, some people are allowed to speak and some people are not. And stopping violence or preventing violence is not as important as taking a political stand. And that's really not what I want to.
No, we don't want to see violence. You don't want to live in I don't want to. And the thing is that I absolutely don't support white nationalism or white supremacy. I don't support Nazism. I don't support any of that. Quite fucking obviously, I think if you took a moment to look at the people that I work with. But here's the thing. Now after Boston, I didn't actually watch Charlotte very closely. Charlottesville. I didn't watch Charlottesville very closely, but Boston I watched closely. And now what makes me curious about the whole situation in Charlottesville is how many people who are labeled Nazis there who weren't, who were simply there because it was labeled a free speech rally and they wanted to support the free speech of everyone, which is a principle that we used to hold dear. So now I don't even know. And we could be looking at the people at Charlottesville, and I've noticed that what's happened is people have started to muscle in and move closer and start to try to push them out of polite society, the people at Charlottesville. And I don't even know if they are actual Nazis because nobody will talk to them.
I know that some of them are. I know that Chris Cantwell would not describe himself as a Nazi, right? But he is a white separatist. I don't think he feels he's a white supremacist. I don't think he feels whites are better than anybody else or that other races are inferior. I think he thinks that different races have different traits and different distributions and blah, blah, blah. And the science reflects that to a degree, right? And that this is, and that racism and racial bias is a fact of human life. It's a fact of human psychology that, we trust people who look like us more than we do people who don't look like us, apparently, right? And this is all sort of, none of this is particularly controversial in terms of, like, the research. It's debatable, but it's not necessarily what would be considered controversial. It's just what people do with it, potentially. The actions that they choose to take because of it, potentially. that's controversial. Like I was telling Brian, one of my kids has a lower IQ than the other two. That doesn't mean that I think he's inferior or I, want him, to suffer.
Gas the child.
I don't think he's subhuman, right? Like, so why would I think that even if an entire group of people had a 5-point lower IQ on average, why would I use that to justify hating them? That just seems stupid to me, right?
Well, the other thing is
that seems a it's a very low IQ approach to take, to the issue of IQ distribution, right? So
I'm just going to get in there. The other thing is that the issue of IQ doesn't put white people at the top.
No, it doesn't.
3 rungs down from the top.
I know, it's hilarious, and yet the people who said, because I broadly agreed with Cantwell's statements on IQ, and just the fact of difference in IQ, because I agreed broadly with that, they're like, you're arguing for white supremacy and the dehumanization of blacks. Well, I'm like, am I dehumanizing whites? I said specifically that Asians and certain other groups of people have higher IQs than whites. Ashkenazi Jews. And so, like, does that mean that I'm a Jewish supremacist or an Asian supremacist?
I think the conclusion is simple. We are both Jewish supremacists and Nazis.
And I think whites are subhuman. Like, what does it even have? Like, it may have some explanatory power in terms of disparate outcomes. That's it. It's not a justification to discriminate. It's not a fucking justification to see other people as subhuman. It's not a justification to, promote eugenics, right? None of that. And
you speak for yourself, Karen. I personally believe in the ultimate supremacy of the Jewish race, and that we all are eventually going to be their goy pig. Okay, am I getting? Okay, I don't. I'm being sarcastic here. Pay piggies, and I am one. I'm going to be very happy when that happens. I'm going to be quite content.
When our Jew overlords take over, yeah.
I'm different than all the parentheses Jew and parentheses. I think everything will be better when they take us in hand and assume the Jewish burden over the rest of the human race.
Like, I find the entire argument that, like, and I this is where Chris Cantwell and I part ways. Right, is yes, there's an argument to be made that some disparities in outcome are not the result of, not completely the result of prejudice or unfairness or injustice or whatever, right? But like he said, that's why the IQ difference is why they're filling up our prisons. I'm like, no, it's fucking not, right? Like, IQ difference might account for some of that, but not in the way you think. It doesn't make people more criminal. It just makes them smart enough to avoid detection, or smart enough to bend the law to the point right before it breaks, so they technically didn't do nothing wrong. Right? That's why. Right? That's why there might be an IQ correlation with criminality, is not because criminality has more to do with temperament and personality than IQ. Right? And it's just like, I'm sorry, but like the entire fucking thing is muddied on both sides, right? Because you have Chris Cantwell and people like him, and they're so sure they're right, and they're so sure they're fucking righteous, right? And there's really no talking to them. I wanted to let him talk. I wanted to let him say his piece, right? Because I know that nobody in the media is actually presenting a full picture of what this guy is about, right?
Yep.
At the same time, I think the whole idea of a white ethno-state is, even if you got rid of the moral implications of it, it's completely fucking unworkable. Like, there's just no way you're going to do it. At least not without violence and coercion, and I'm not prepared to do that, and I'm not prepared to sit back and watch somebody do that. That's fucked up.
For sure.
Right? And, I mean, but at the same time, here's the thing, right? The Nazi guards in the concentration camps in Germany, they wrote letters to their wives talking about how much they missed them and home and their favorite meal and reminding them to tell the kids to do their homework. They did. It's not like they used to, like, that they beat their pets and mistreated their children or anything like that. They're just fucking people, right? Yep. And there's nothing particularly sociopathic about a lot of people who are willing to go along with really fucking egregious things.
Yeah, that should be a lesson to everybody who's currently using the word Nazi to create a class of people that you can justifiably engage in violence against.
Exactly, and this is the narrative, right? We've replaced vermin and dogs and scum and rats,
and Jew, and black.
We've replaced those words with Nazi and fucking all kinds of other shit, right? Alt-right and all of these things, right? And
Same mentality.
It's fine to punch a Nazi. It's righteous to punch a Nazi. And we are 100% positive that we are righteous and they are evil.
And anybody could be a Nazi. Evil. Anybody could be a Nazi. A hippie could be a Nazi. Somebody who's left could be a Nazi. A Bernie supporter could be a Nazi. Anyone can be a Nazi now. You just have to, I don't know, just pass against this, whatever the fuck makes you a Nazi these days, invisible ink spray.
Yeah,
and then you're suddenly...
walk too close to it and the stink gets on you. And it's like, I'm just like, no, we have to stop this. I know humans. This isn't going to stop until there's a huge smoking pile of bodies. And then everybody will be like, oh shit, we did it again! Yeah, well, I mean... It's infuriating too, right? Because, you know, it's not like I'm trying to stop this shit from escalating for the sake of these white supremacists and these Nazis. Because, you know, if we're going to have a race war, the whites are going to win.
Mm-hmm.
At least in the US.
Numbers. No. Well,
in the U.S., it's the numbers and it's the guns.
It's the numbers and the guns. I get that, but the thing is, I'm not so sure because of this reason. I don't think that all white people would come together to actually engage in a race war against the other races. Actually, I think that more white people will actually target other white people that they think are a threat to the races. Because I think that in many ways, one of the things that is part of Western, like white Western, culture, is that it is open and welcoming to other races.
So white guilt too.
Yeah,
right?
that's sort of mixed in there, but I think that's part of what makes Americans. Like, it's part of what it is about them, and the ones that tend to identify more closely with being American than they do with their race tend to be more open to other races and protective of other groups too, because they believe in the American dream and these Western values and these sort of these ideas. So I think actually,
when there's a mob,
if it got down to it, I just want to say, when it got down to it, there's actually a pretty good chance that more white people will take up arms against the white people that want to engage in this race war. So they actually might be divided in that way. And of course, the other races may be too, but I think to a lesser degree, because I think that they have been other races like Hispanics, especially blacks, Hispanics, and like the ones that tend to do worse. So not like the Asians. They tend to identify more with their race as a defining factor, even though Hispanic is not a race. They actually identify with it as though it is one, and I think that they tend to they tend to be more attached to being Hispanic or being black than they do with being American. And I think that that has a lot to do with the media, our education system, our entertainment industry, etc., in the way that they have sort of conditioned them out of being American, not feeling attached to it. And I think that if we actually got down to it and we got down to a race war, I don't think the whites. There's a chance the whites might not win because they may be up against a lot of their own people for these sort of progressive values. So
well, yeah, but you have to realize that when you have a movement like this that turns.
No, it's not going to. He's absolutely right.
But no. That turns disgusting like this, where they're dragging people out of their homes, right? A Khmer Rouge type, they'll
Sure.
eat their own, and the first people in their ranks to go are going to be the white people, and then it's going to be the light-skinned blacks, and then it's going to be the Hispanics who can pass as white, right?
Yeah.
That's what it's going to be.
But the issue is that this isn't exactly polarized between the people who openly hate on white people, or the people who want to get rid of any kind of multicultural diversity in our society. There's a huge middle here that also has no interest in creating a white nationalist state, and would possibly side on the side of the people who are defending who they consider to be the vulnerable groups, because they've defined their identities in terms of defending the vulnerable groups. You know, bring your sick, you're unwelcome, etc., etc.
Yeah.
To our shores, and we shall shelter you. And that's pretty much what made America great. I would say that diversity is key to any culture that wants to become great. Now, I'll give that a caveat. It needs to be a diversity of people who have an emotional investment in considering the land that they're coming to be their primary identity. So they're American first. And then the diversity creates an incredibly powerful, sustaining, technologically advanced state, which is interesting, because I got into this bit of I don't want to say a tiff, but a back and forth with a white nationalist who was complaining about my impureness, my having laid with other races or some shit, even though I haven't. My husband is white. Well, I guess he isn't white because he's of Irish descent, but he's also German, so I don't know how that neutralizes the Irish and makes him white. But you know, if you have Irish in you, you're obviously not completely white. But if you have German in you, maybe that turns you into like Southern French, you know, from the south of France. I don't know. But anyway, so the idea that I have laid with the unsavory, you know, non-human men is not actually true, but I still would stand in solidarity with them if some jackass white or Nazi was starting to kill people who were minorities. And he said, well, you realize that your culture is going to be like, you're going to, you can have your diverse culture, but you'll just have to, you'll be reliant on us for our forbearance and resources and shit. And I was like, dude, identitarians of all stripes have a terrible track record of maintaining infrastructure.
Yeah.
And that's going to be the same for your white identitarian little third world hellhole that you create as well.
Well, what gets me too is like, I mean, like, yes, okay, we can compare Nazis and communists, right? Well, you know, communism sustains itself for a lot longer before it inevitably collapses and everybody is completely miserable, and there's usually a higher body count than there is with Nazism. I think Nazism is, it's a message that's not wrapped in a fucking bow.
Well, I don't know what you're talking about, Karen, because we haven't actually tried communism yet. I mean, we're just not there yet. We just haven't actually done it. Every time we do, every time we get the ball rolling,
right way.
No, we just need the right people. Every time we get the ball rolling, the goddamn capitalists come along and they fuck it all up. And we were so close so many times. Same thing with Nazism, by the way. We haven't actually tried it yet. So I mean, we just need to get it right. You know, that's all it is. We just got to keep trying. I mean, you know, whatever.
I'm just blown away. I'm just blown because you know, I know you're joking, but a lot of the people who say that shit are absolutely 100% sincere.
Yeah.
And you know, like I said, there are these few commenters on our men's rights who seem to think that everything that is not pure and good is not leftist by definition. And it's not even right. It's far right, neoliberal, alt-right, fascist, whatever. So the Democratic Party, far right. Bernie Sanders, far right. You know, Castro, far right. You know, Soviet Union, far right.
Actually, Karen,
Khmer Rouge,
trying to
far
qualify.
right.
You try to qualify this. This is really simple because it really isn't about politics. It's about corporate media wanting to decide who is human and who isn't. And that's it. Mm-hmm. It doesn't fucking matter what the specific narrative is. It just so happened that the left narrative has sort of won out in the moral race. It has become the greatest.
It's not a left narrative. Identitarian politics are not actually left, and they're not based on Marxism. In the same way that if I pick up a hammer and bash somebody's skull in it, it becomes not a hammer because I'm not driving nails with it anymore.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So it's like, I don't like these people.
What did you say? You said it wasn't a left narrative? It wasn't a right narrative?
He said, this guy says that identity politics are a tool of the far right. It is not left whatsoever.
Oh,
it's both.
Okay, whatever. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm actually currently been like.
Last I checked, conflict theory was devised by Marx. Yes, other people built on it, but it originated with Marx. Right? And the entire identity politics narrative going on today that's being taught in schools is all based on conflict theory, to the exclusion of all other sociological theories.
Honestly, I've been talking with other politically involved folks about this and really been like mulling this over, and I'm starting to wonder if because of what the alt-right, or at least these white identitarians, what their ultimate goals are, I'm not sure that they're right-wing. And I know that sounds weird, but I don't know. I'm still thinking this over, because the stuff they ask for, the stuff that they're hoping to accomplish, it sounds like the same shit that Antifa and the communists and stuff want. It's just done with different pretense. It's either it's just
a matter of potato.
Yeah, but I mean, they want similar stuff, and they want it the same way. They want bigger government. They want, social programs. They want to spend other people's money, and I don't think that's a right wing thing. But I'm holding off on a final sort of judgment on that. But that's just.
Can I just point something out?
Yeah,
we got through one paragraph, and it's now like.
I know.
We got
45 minutes, and we read one paragraph, and we aren't even talking about the fucking story. So
I mean, I always figured it would be like a starting point for something bigger.
Yeah,
we've lost the plot.
Oh yeah. Well, when you said you want to play the video, I figured we were going way off the plantation at this point. No pun intended. But before we do, I want to read. We did get a super chat I should read. So Joey Jojo gave us $5. Thank you, Joey. And he says, I am honestly sick of all this shit. I just want to play video games and shit post. Fuck everything. I'm not even white. I just want this to end. I feel your feel. But this is what we do.
Don't go.
Yeah,
we all want this to end. We all want the identitarians to go the fuck away.
Yeah.
And the ists, the isms, and all the utopiasts, like, just leave us to our filth, please. Just allow the germs to exist, but they don't want to. They have to make everything pure. Okay, continue.
All right, we'll continue the article. All right, Levant, a longtime conservative persona who has morphed from early Reform Party figure to Western Standard publisher to right-wing Sun News Network host to independent far-right internet gadfly, asserted Tuesday that his company was not sympathetic to the white nationalist group comprised of several loosely affiliated extremist groups, including neo-Nazis known as the alt-right.
Wait. How did the alt-right become the white nationalist group?
Well, the thing is, though, the alt-right's hard to define because it's a mixed bag. There are definitely white nationalists in there, and white identitarians, and neo-Nazis, and KKK people, but there are also folks that are a lot more, I don't know, maybe a bit more moderate than that. It's hard. But the thing is too, is they're also fighting amongst each other. There's a lot of debate about, how to go about things, about what goals are attainable, what's not. They're actually having a lot of discussions within the alt-right, and there's a lot of infighting. I wouldn't even say it's infighting. It's like arguments, and ongoing discussions about what direction they should go in. But there definitely is some of this stuff in there. Definitely. So.
Oh yeah, no, and wasn't Richard Spencer the guy who coined the term?
Yeah, Richard Spencer. I guess he did it a while back. I'm not really sure how old this term is, but there's
always been some association between the alt-right and the idea of white nationalism or white pride or white what they would call white self-defense. And all of that. And like, I honestly think, and like I said to Cantwell, I think if the narrative that's being taught in universities about, you know, oppression and, you know, white people are to blame for everything, and we need to, you know, you even have professors saying we need to eliminate whiteness as an identity, and whiteness needs to be eliminated, and all of this stuff, right? And if you didn't have stuff going on like at Evergreen, where there's just no end to the list of demands, and appeasement doesn't work, right? You know, trying to reason with them doesn't work, appeasing them doesn't work, giving them everything they want just inspires them to make another list and start, you know, demanding more things. And I mean, it's, and all the while they're saying that, you know, you're not treating them fairly, and all of this, and you're racist. And, you know, if that narrative would just die, right? White nationalism would never have become fashionable again at all, period.
No.
Right, because it's a response, and everybody's saying Antifa is a response to the rise of white nationalism. No, white nationalism
is a rise to Antifa, and
only
the left
became popular when the left started to
extreme
lose
left
its fucking minds. Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't even look. I wouldn't even say the extreme left, and I know it sounds like strong, but let's put it this way: it doesn't feel as though the extreme left is fringe when you consider how much of their talking points you see. I mean, we spend how much of the time on Honey Badger Radio refuting and looking at, you know, feminist articles and videos
from MTV.
Yeah, that's on. Yeah, it's on MTV. It's on The Guardian. It's on Slate. It's on Al Jazeera Plus. On Mike.com, ATTN,
Salon,
Huffington Post,
The
Salon.
Atlantic.
This is Cosmopolitan. I mean, this is not. This isn't fringe. This is CNN. You know, like there was a last night. I think there was a rally in Phoenix, Arizona, and I was watching a bit of it because I was curious because I saw everybody was talking about it on Twitter. So I watched part of Trump's speech, and he didn't say anything weird or crazy. It was all very reasonable, and CNN was flipping their shit. They had people coming on saying, I think he's seriously sick. I mean, seriously, mentally ill. We need to do something. He should step down. And I'm like, what has he said that's so... But that's because this is their narrative. All they have is doubling down, doubling down, doubling down. So I have to ask myself, you know, and I would have said, you know, like, I don't know, like a year ago, I would have said it's the far left. But now I'm wondering because I don't think that this is reflective of people, everyday folks and normies across the country that tend to lean left in terms of their social views. I mean, socially, I guess I'm liberal too, and I think a lot of times people conflate the two, and I don't think that they're actually synonymous. But this is not appearing to be fringe because these are people with enormous platforms and huge megaphones on very mainstream areas that are saying really fucked up shit about anybody who doesn't agree with them, about entire groups of people, about half of the population of the planet, men, about all white people everywhere. This is crazy shit, you know? Yeah,
no, and it's like they're, you know, like in Australia, they're looking to start instituting feminist theories on domestic violence and the idea that boys need to take responsibility for that, you know, in preschool now. Mm-hmm. They're looking at, you know, like even before kindergarten, that this needs to be something that is, you know, and I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? And then when I see, you know, like because I watched Bill Whittle for a while, right? Because, I mean, he's a smart guy. I don't agree with him on everything, right? I don't think that pulling up your bootstraps works for every single human being. Luck has a lot to do with it. You know, some people get a head start.
It's who you know, that kind of thing. Sure.
Life is not a meritocracy. You know, sometimes you need a person to make a phone call for you to get a job, right? So, I mean, it's not there's no conservative utopia, okay? But he did a video where he showed an MSNBC news story about a Tea Party rally against Obamacare in front of the White House, and they showed clips of this guy who was open carrying. He had an assault rifle strapped across his back. He had a gun in a holster, a pistol in a holster on his hip, and they showed him from the back, from the top of his collar to the cuffs of his shirt, his white dress shirt. And then they cut to the commentator saying, this has sparked worries about, far-right racism, and that this is really a racial white supremacist backlash against the Obama presidency based on the fact that Obama is black, blah, 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 blah.
This was a white lash.
They cut the guy's head and hands off because he was black.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's completely mendacious. And I just wanted to point something out. I would tell a white nationalist would probably do this, and a Nazi would probably do it at a point of gun. A white nationalist might do it with social shaming. You got to fire your producer because he's Puerto Rican. I'd tell him to go fuck himself. And the other thing is that I would say exactly the same thing to anybody who told me I couldn't talk to someone like Chris Cantwell. Go fuck yourself. Because first of all, I want to make sure he's actually said what he's accused of in the media. And second of all, I want to understand if he really is a Nazi or a white nationalist, which I guess he was a white nationalist, I want to understand what makes him tick, so I can figure out if there's a way that maybe you could move away from being that way, and just not necessarily like deprogram him or debrainwash him, but just understand where he's coming from and how people like that come about. So that you can, instead of shooting them or shooting, that's the thing. I mean, the alternative between talking to them, finding out if they actually are what corporate media says they are, and talking to them and figuring out what the dynamics are that created them, the alternative to maybe, massaging them away from their craziness, the alternative is to kill them and then kill everyone associated with them, and then everyone associated with, like, I'm seeing a choice between let's uphold free speech, let's figure these people out, let's present maybe a healthy way to move past this identitarianism bullshit, versus which is starting with spitting on them, assaulting them, beating them, probably going to move to killing them, or making sure that they can't actually have a job, taking their kids away, pushing them out of society. Ostracizing them, leaving.
That'll make them less violent and
yeah,
hostile.
And then essentially going the route of ending up with a huge a pile of smoking bodies. You know what? I know people will judge me for this, but I would rather go the route of finding out who these people are and why they exist, and trying to figure out some way to talk them back from the cliff, than shooting them in the head, because this seems to be the alternative. Or ostracizing them from society.
I do want to add something, because, like, I disagree with Chris Cantwell on a lot of things, and I have continued in a Skype conversation with him briefly, in terms of how I disagree with him and stuff, right? He's allowed me to speak, he's listened to what I've had to say, he has disagreed and said I'm not convinced. He doesn't want me dead. He doesn't think I'm the devil. Okay? If I were to do the same thing with Yvette Falarca,
yep,
you can be guaranteed she would be justifying violence against me.
She'd try to get you fired from your job. She would try to, yeah, for sure. And she may not want, to hurt you herself. But if you were to get hurt by somebody else, some radical, like really radical person, she'd be like, she'd be okay with it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, so I mean, like, I'm looking at not just the different views, right, in terms of, or the different belief systems in terms of, the sort of oppressor-oppressed model that's embraced by these hard leftists, and the white pride, anti-white genocide model. We need to save the white race, preserve the white race, blah, 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 all of that stuff on the other side, right? And I'm looking at both of those ideologies, and I'm thinking that they both kind of, like, suck and are stupid, right? But I wouldn't be afraid to go to a neo-Nazi rally and disagree with them. Mm-hmm. I would be afraid to go to a fucking BAM rally or a Antifa rally and disagree with them. I would be worried for my physical safety.
I don't really want to choose. I think that the either or is not a situation I want to get into. And I don't really have a basis to choose either. I've never been to a neo-Nazi rally.
Well, the views are equally unreasonable, but at least at this point, right?
I think that if you don't have personal experience with both, I would suggest that this is shaky territory to start making an equation. Oh yeah, it'd be okay to go there, but not okay to go there.
Well, so far, that's how it looks.
Well, but then again, you do have the evidence from Charlottesville, so apparently there was a whole bunch of well-armed Nazis and white nationalists who got into it with the Antifa, and nobody got shot, although one person did get run over. So that's
true. That's true. And I mean, nobody's, we're not giving a pass to that. But I think what Karen's getting at is that there's a side that appears to be open to conversation and debate and discussion, and there's another side that is not.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that side is the white nationalists or the neo-Nazis. I think that side is the people who are conservative and right. And for free speech.
Well, I think that the white nationalists and the neo-Nazis and the conservatives of all bents, right, are the ones who are most heavily dependent on free speech because their ideas are unpopular, right? And they're unpopular in the institutional sense. And I agree. I fully agree. At this point, I would feel safer going and disagreeing with a neo-Nazi because I would feel like he would try to convince me, right? He wouldn't just fucking beat me with a fucking lead pipe, okay? Because of the relative positions in the political landscape right now. And that's basically the fact that the entire left, the entire mainstream media, corporate media, the entire university system, academia, social work, education, everything, right? The law.
The entertainment industry, right. Everything.
The entertainment industry. Everything leans in favor of that sort of hard left position. Even if they're not hard left, they're gonna give the hard left a pass because
they're more sympathetic.
Left. Yeah, and so I think that neo-Nazis and white nationalists and those people, they're desperate to be heard, right? And they understand that if they don't behave, right, there will be a clampdown. Right? That the other side has the power to essentially censor them or to beat them into a coma with relative impunity.
Yeah, the only problem I'm having with this entire line of conversation, and I'm sorry if I sound a little pissed off, is that the only person so far who's been killed has been killed either by somebody attending, who might have been a white nationalist or a neo-Nazi, or part of the Unite the Right rally. I'm not sure. I think it's just alleged at this point. But the fact is that we have a body count of 1, I believe, right? 1. Is there more? There were probably a few political shootings, right?
It depends on how far back you want to look. Like there were, like Black Lives Matter has killed a few people, and Antifa put a guy in a coma, I believe.
Yeah.
So it depends on how far back you want to look. Like this Black Lives Matter stuff happened before the election. I take what you're saying.
I'm getting really fucking annoyed by this line of conversation. Who gives a shit if the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists are slightly easier to talk to than the extreme left or the Antifa? I mean, or Black Lives Matter. I mean, they're all extreme.
Well, the reason why it's important.
No. I'm moving on now. We're moving on.
The reason why it's important is because the only way you're ever going to deal with the problem is by talking.
Yes, this is true. Absolutely true. The only way you're going to deal with the problem is by talking. And you can't talk... Okay, I see what you're saying. You cannot talk to people on the left. I mean, they just don't want to listen. Right. They don't think they have to listen. I mean, at least the people who are supporting this kind of shit, they don't think they have to listen. Because and here's the thing. They have contempt for us. They think we are filthy, subhuman creatures. They just give us a label, and that justifies all the violence against us.
Well, what I think is hilarious is that, like, we have essentially people who are really, really fucking angry at me for, associating the MRM with, this whole thing, right? I mean, where were they when we were doing a hangout with Russian Deadpool, right? And why weren't they saying, oh, you better delete that video and like, just delete everything, shred everything that shows any association between this male feminist who murdered his girlfriend. You don't want to be associated with that. And we were perfectly civil to him. We let him have his say, right? And it's like
a couple hangouts with him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it's like, okay, so why is it this, and if we've invited Kevin Logan on, if we had Yvette Falarka on, right? Would they say, oh, you're consorting with communists?
No.
How dare you? Like,
well, here's the thing. I think it's because the left really has gotten the moral bit in its mouth, and it's convinced itself that it is the only moral arbiter, and everybody else is eventually going to be considered Nazis. And the funny thing is that circle will be increasingly narrowed, as we saw in Boston. It's pretty much going to all come down to whatever the corporate media can call Nazis today, whoever pisses them off today. Whoever doesn't toe the line enough today, and it'll just get increasingly narrower and narrower and narrower, and they're just running away. They've got the bit in their mouth. They're just at a full gallop towards a cliff, and there's nothing that you can do to stop them. It's like, yeah, you realize where this is going to end. I mean, if you're left and you're listening to me now, which you probably aren't, I mean, why would you, right? Because you're absolutely right about everything, and you have the entire moral reality completely mapped out. And you have it all, you've got it all figured out. But here's my warning. And it's going to be very interesting, because I don't want to say I told you so. But where you're going, where you're headed, your hand is going to be responsible for killing people. It's going to be responsible for the next mountain of smoking bodies. Because that is the end. That is the end game. That is the end game whenever a group gets this moral bit in their mouth and they start thinking of people who do not agree with them as subhuman.
Well, the reality is that every single group that's committed an atrocity on another believed that they had the moral high ground. They believed that they were right to do it. And that's the only way that you can actually convince people to massacre other people, is to convince them that it's the morally upright thing to do and that they're absolutely right to do it. And so this idea of moral certainty in one's actions is really one of the most dangerous things that humans actually can glom onto. And, and I don't hate anyone. I mean, like, I know that some people hate Chris Cantwell. I know that some people would hate Yvette Falarka. They hate communists, they hate, fascists, they hate whoever, right? They might hate blacks or Asians or who the fuck ever, right? I don't hate anyone. There's no point to hating anyone once you realize how evolved humans are not, right? How evolved we are not. I mean, you might as well hate the rain for falling on you, right? Mm-hmm. That's how fucking ridiculous human beings are. Right? And how ridiculously not having a clueless about what they're really like, what we are really like.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's really infuriating, and I can understand your sense of infuriation, because there's nothing that can penetrate that haze. They are literally in the grip of a highly addictive drug, and that's moral self-righteousness. And there's nothing that's like, and the funny thing is that, full disclosure, and I said this a bit on my stream on Boston, like, I was a liberal anarchist, up through my 20s, my teens and my 20s. I was very liberal. I was part of the gay, lesbian, and trans queer association in my university. I didn't, and I'm still very much socially liberal. And I used to go to anarchist meetings and philosophy meetings, and we'd talk about anarchism, and we'd ask pointed questions of media and all of that. And when I was part of those groups, we questioned corporate media, and we questioned corporate overreach. And now what I'm seeing is a complete absence of those kinds of questions, questioning big government, questioning corporate overreach. Like Antifa, I don't know what the fuck they are, but they are, and actually I do know what they are, because when we would go to protests, we would see the black bloc, and that's what Antifa was evolved from. And they were always there just to start a fucking fight, a street brawl. And it's just like, this is insane. Like it's like the movement that I was part of, it's just morphed, and it's because of this moral self-righteousness, this belief that you don't have to listen to anyone but yourself. And it's just morphed into this. Oh well, what can you do?
It's peace through violence. That's what
peace
Antifa
through
is.
Violence.
That's what Antifa is.
Peace through violence.
Peace through
violence.
That
makes perfect sense.
Absolutely. I think
let's read a little bit more. I think.
All right. I think the takeaway, though, for what we're looking at, and this is the thing that I think Karen and I are both trying to get at, is that the only way you can solve these problems is by talking to people. And unfortunately, the only people that we can actually talk to right now happen to be in the right. The people on the left don't want to talk. They think that the conversation over and there's no fucking debate. That's what they believe. So that's the reason.
Even if Karen and Brian are more right, I guarantee they're more right than me. I'm pretty fucking not right. Like I'm not change adverse. I never really completely lost my anarchist roots. So and I'm not going down on the right side. I have to acknowledge that they actually listen more right now. They're willing to entertain. I mean, we just talked to Jesse Phillips, right?
Jesse Lee Peterson.
Peterson. I knew it was a P. Sorry. Jesse Peterson. Sorry.
Reverend Peterson.
Reverend Justin
He's such a sweetie.
Yeah, he's very gentle. He's a very gentle soul. Mm. But I was just, and you know, one of the things, just to bring this back to men's rights, when Jesse Peterson talked to Richard Spencer, so even Jesse Peterson talked to this guy.
Yep.
But he talked to him, and he was...
And more important than that, Alison, Richard Spencer wanted to talk to Jesse Lee Peterson. That's important. True. That's important. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so... I didn't actually watch it. You watched it, Brian. So
I did.
Phil, you know... So, but it was, what you described was interesting to me. I'll tell you why it was interesting to me. It was interesting to me because Jesse Peterson was approaching this kind of white nationalism. I don't know, does Richard Spencer call himself a Nazi or something?
No, he does not. No, he says that Nazis don't like him. He's a white nationalist, but in his mind, he's not a Nazi. I don't know. I mean, that's basically the extent of it.
He's essentially a white segregationist.
Yeah.
All right.
He doesn't want to hurt other groups of people. He just wants away from them, I guess.
Okay, great. What's interesting of what Brian described is that Richard Spencer, the way that Jesse Peterson approached Richard Spencer was he was trying to approach him from a more personal level to figure out where these kinds of beliefs, I think, come from psychologically. So Brian was describing to me how Jesse was talking about, what is your, do you love your father? The way that Brian described it is that Richard responded with sort of the generic, oh, of course I love my parents, who doesn't love their parents? Just the standard boilerplate. And did he actually say anything more about that?
No, originally, the thing is, they were talking about the stuff that Richard Spencer, who I guess is normally prepared to talk about, like his beliefs, his goals, what the outright is, what they want, the usual. And it was all very, I wouldn't say it's rehearsed, but I think that I got the sense that Spencer is accustomed to these questions, so he has his answers at the ready, and he's going to deliver them. But when Jesse Lee Peterson started asking him about his personal life and asking him specifically about his father and if he loved his father and these kinds of things, it took Richard Spencer by surprise. I don't think he was expecting that line of questioning. So at first, he was actually kind of resistant, like, I don't know what that has to do with anything. But then, you know, Jesse Lee Peterson coaxed it out of him, like, well, look, I want to know who you are. The people want to know who you are. We want to know more about you, because it might give us an idea of where your ideas come from. And so he asked him about his father, and that's when Richard Spencer said, well, yeah, of course I love my dad. You know, but that the takeaway that Jesse Lee Peterson got from his line of questions, and I'm sorry I have to paraphrase because I saw this a little while ago, was that Richard Spencer has unresolved issues with his father. That was what Jesse Lee Peterson's takeaway was. And the thing is, the fact that he got Richard Spencer to talk about this personal stuff on his show, it may not yield any fruit right off the bat. Like, you're not going to get, you know, no one's going to sit down with an ideologue and change their mind with a single conversation. But the way that he approached the discussion, I think, is Jesse Lee Peterson's way of getting the ball rolling to get to whatever the root is of Richard Spencer's beliefs and where they may come from, because Jesse Peterson does not agree with any kind of collectivist thinking, identity politics whatsoever, no matter where it comes from. He's against it, end of story. But when he gets a chance to talk to someone who uses that as their methodology in terms of, you know, their approaches for doing things, I think that this is his way of essentially getting to the root of it. And unfortunately, Black Lives Matter activists, feminists, you know, those kinds of people, they will never in a million years go on his show, even though he invites them on all the time, just like we do. I sent an invitation to Kathy Young. I haven't heard back from her yet. I sent one to Christina Hoff Sommers. I haven't heard back from her yet. I send invitations to feminists all the time, and very few have actually come on. So this is, I think, what I'm getting at is, you know, this is what happened with the Richard Spencer conversation. I think that it was very interesting, and that's why I mentioned it to you, Alison. So you can go on with what your takeaway was.
Well, actually, no, I wanted to, Karen, just a sec, because I want to get more. The conversation went to other places, and you were talking about Jordan Peterson also.
Yes,
something that you felt was
yeah, because I was looking. Look, we talked about this a little bit on the show where we talked about female, you know, violence by proxy. And I was noticing this. There's something that I'm, you know, that I started to notice, which was there were men that were joining these either identitarian movements, or they were getting involved in other socio-political discussions that were going on online. That have, some of them have transcended into the real world, some of them have not. So, you know, you have like the men in Antifa, the men in By Any Means Necessary, the men that have joined the Black Bloc, all these other sort of far leftist, you know, extremist groups, and they're going out there and they're committing violent acts and, you know, destroying property and all that and rioting. And this stuff is, these groups are headed up by women. They run them. There are women that run, you know, By Any Means Necessary. There are women that run all these groups, even Black Lives Matter. If you go to the website, it's feminist. It's intersectionality from top to bottom. There's nothing about men really in there. And the weird thing is that Black Lives Matter started because a man died, even though it was reported falsely or whatever. So I also saw this stuff with the alt-right, and I saw these guys marching in Charlottesville, and I started to wonder if there's something about male identity that is at the core of what this is. And that's why I looked at the Richard Spencer interview and the Chris Cantwell interview and, you know, stuff like that. And then I saw a video by Jordan. It was a Jordan Peterson one where someone in the audience asked him about the alt-right. And Jordan Peterson, they asked him for his thoughts on it. And he said, it's incomplete, you know, is what he said. He said, it's because it's about identity with the father, but it's incomplete because the father has to become the son. And so I think that Jordan Peterson, Jesse Lee Peterson, and all of this stuff going on with these groups, there is something that is connecting them all, and it has to do with men. And that's what I'm thinking. But then, Alice, you go ahead. You can take it from there.
Yeah. I take your connections, and I think maybe I can build on them. I think that first off, and I mentioned that during my response to the Boston rally, I think that this shaming of men, and not just the shaming of men, but also teaching women this kind of learned helplessness, tends to promote these kind of extremist movements of all sorts. And the reason why is because men who feel ashamed want to do something, want to serve to alleviate that shame. And women who feel helpless want to feel a sense of power. And these kinds of movements give them both what they want. But the genesis of all this is a narrative that shames men for being men and tells women that because they're women, they're helpless. They're in a position where they're constantly being oppressed by men.
One of the things that Chris Cantwell brought up that I found really interesting was that he essentially said, you know, like people, you know, I wrote some articles for A Voice for Men, and now and then I was apparently a misogynist, even though, you know, I'd laid down my life for a woman. That apparently means that I hate them, right? You know, it's like so he's extremely gynocentric, extremely fucking gynocentric. And I think that he pulls a lot of his sense of self-worth from protecting white women.
And I would say,
you know,
to extend that thought about gynocentrism, I would say an obsession with utopia is also gynocentric, because it seems to me to be almost like an obsession with this abstract mother, this place of all-consuming comfort and ease and lack of want and worry. It's like sort of crawling back into the womb. So all of these utopian movements seem to be centered around this need to go back into a place where everything is provided for you.
What drives me crazy about that is that, you know, like Jordan Peterson has said in the past, you know, if you actually brought about the utopia, within 3 months, somebody would pull out a gun and start shooting just to, you know, make things exciting, just to, like, you know, liven things up, because a utopia, like an absolute perfect utopia where there's always enough food and nobody really has any work to do and all of that, would be boring as fuck for everybody, right? Because part of life is the sense of struggle and the sense of accomplishment, you know, that you get from overcoming struggles. And I think this is why things like welfare, and not as an emergency measure, but as sort of a generational career, right, is something that kills the human spirit, because there's nothing to struggle against. Everything's provided for you, and it kills your soul.
And I went on to sort of try to make a jab at, not make a jab, but take a jab at explaining what I heard Brian say Jordan Peterson said about the father has to become the son. I'm not exactly sure. I probably don't understand what exactly he's getting at, but I think that I have something related that might be, because these white identitarians, this extreme far right, it's generally fairly authoritarian. And the idea of the father embodying order is something that's sort of part of all of this. Well, the way that I tried to describe this to Brian, and I don't know if it worked, but maybe it did, is that the authoritarian father is actually the mother subservient father. It's the father who wants their child to obey a set of rules to keep them constrained and to reduce their individual freedom. And I mean, in some ways you have to, because we want to be part of a society. But in many ways that sort of like is a situation where the father is an extension of the mother. Because that, if you think about it, keeping a child in a sense of order, obeying rules, making sure they do this X, Y, and Z. It's not unimportant, but it's still keeping a child within a constrained environment in which you have to learn the rules of the constrained environment, in this constrained, ordered environment. And the way that I approached that is I said, well, there's the mother subservient father who's sort of an extension of this constrained maternal environment that has these rules that you have to learn and you just have to abide by them, and that is it. And then I called another type of father the realized father, who instead of teaching their children to maintain a strict order by battling chaos, which could be, I don't know, the intermingling of the races or the possibility that there's Nazis right around the corner, the realized father teaches his children to use chaos to fly instead, to fly to their goal instead. And the difference is that if you imagine a hawk on the wind, the hawk doesn't control the wind, and yet the hawk still uses the wind to get where he wants to go. And I think the realized father teaches his children that, how to use adversity, how to use chaos, how to use disorder. And to achieve a goal, to use it as a way of and a means to get to your goal. And I think that children who have mother subservient fathers, and that might include not all single mothers, but I think single mothers tend to end up in this sort of circle too. Will seek out ideologies and isms in order to battle chaos into order and defeat the villain, which is other men. Because this is what's really funny, is that on the alt-right you have this narrative where the people, the men of the alt-right are going to defeat the chaos dragon. The dragon of chaos on the right, on the left, on the control left. And the control left has exactly the same narrative about the alt-right, that they're going to defeat the dragon of chaos, which is the men on the alt-right. So they both want to become heroes by defeating each other. And they both actually need each other to be heroes. And that's something that would come out of a very mothering form of fatherhood or even single motherhood. And so that they'll turn into a villain. Anyone who threatens the identity they share with their actual mother, white nationalism or black nationalism, if that's a thing still, or their idealized mother, which is a utopia. Utopia is an idealized mother. You may have had a crappy mother, but utopia can become your mother in almost like a spiritual, psychological sense. You have a craving for this wonderful society where which everything is provided and you have no wants. So the realized father helps his children center their identity. There's and science proves this, there's sort of this ineffable point of agency that exists prior to our brain making up words and stories to explain why we made decisions that we made. So that the realized father helps children to center their identity in that moment of decision-making that is totally, you can't be explained through words. In fact, like the person talking to you now isn't the decision-making entity that Alison is. It's just the words that are being said after the fact. And but I think the realized father helps his children center themselves in that moment of agency. And that's where all our decisions and actions sort of find their genesis. And I think that in a healthy balance between men and women raising children, the realized father will raise his children to be conscious and aware while they're making the choice to take action, by getting them in that moment of being able to navigate the chaos and fly the winds. And a good mother will set down habitual action taking, because a lot of our actions, making decisions is tiring. So a lot of our actions end up being very habitual. We do one thing after another. We're not in a conscious state. We're just following the narrative. And I think
we're on autopilot.
We're on autopilot. Good mothers lay down good habitual action taking. So productive habitual action taking, not eating 3 tubs of ice cream, getting up, going to work on time, this kind of stuff, just the habitual action taking. And between the two of them, they create an individual who's very functional in society. And so in conclusion, the realized father develops his child's ability to take conscious, aware action, which I think maybe is where Jordan Peterson, I'm not exactly sure how the father becomes the son, but I think the distinction between the mother subservient father, who's authoritarian.
Yeah, I think one of the things he says is, because it's all about returning to the individual. So he's basically moving from the collective, I guess, which is, the alt-right, at least in the mind of Peterson, is still a collectivist, in its organization. And he's saying, but the goal should be to return to boil it down to the individual, which I guess is his way of saying the son, because he is being abstract. So,
yeah, well, I mean, in this case, the individual, the realized father does develop the individual, because if you think about it, this authoritarian father really emphasizes the collective. The children of the authoritarian father will be seeking out these collective ideologies and isms or belief systems in order to create a framework in which they can battle the villains on the other side and become a hero. So that, I mean, I think there's a tie there. So the realized father creates more individual, because individuality is really about agency. It's not about habits. It's not about identity. It's not really about your belief in a utopia. It's about your feeling that you have the ability to take action and affect positive change in your life. At least I think that's what individuality really boils down to. Anyway, I'll step
Okay.
off the sun. Yeah. Do we want to just move on? Because I think the letter is going to take forever.
Well, what we should do, at least on some capacity, is tell the audience how the Rebel Media stuff is related to everything that we've been talking about.
Might be a good idea.
Yeah. So the thing is, I guess what we are looking at is the way the corporate media is reporting on this sort of stuff, which is...
Well, actually...
go ahead.
Well, first of all, they're lying about a whole bunch of shit. Second of all, a lot of the complaints about Rebel Media seem a little bit slightly weird, and I'm not actually on their side as much. I mean, the some complaints I think are founded, some seem a little bit odd. Like the complaints about asking for more than... It depends on how much more they're asking for in terms of their activities. I mean, the thing is that whenever I do an activity, I always put in a contingency fee or fund, and I always do the worst case scenario. And inevitably what happens is sometimes we fundraise more money than we end up spending. And sometimes we fundraise exactly what we end up spending. And sometimes we fundraise under, because inevitably there's some stupid thing that happens that causes us to have to spend more money. And so on average, we're sort of getting it right where it needs to be. But the reason why I don't necessarily go with the lowest estimate, I always go with the worst case estimate, I always do the contingency fund, is that it is, in my opinion, it's worse to not be able to do what you said you're going to do, because basically at that point you're throwing away everyone's money that's invested in you, than it is to actually have additional, like to undershoot it too much.
Yeah,
So,
no,
overshoot it too much.
I hear you on that. I thought I had actually included enough of a contingency fee in the fundraiser I did for London, ICMI London, and I ended up having to fork about $700 out of my own pocket, and I did it out of my own pocket because I was the one who organized it, and I was the one who made the decisions as to how much we needed and all of that, and so what are you going to do, right? You take responsibility and you fork over the fucking cash. But
the other... go ahead.
Rebel Media has been accused of essentially they run a fundraiser, it hits goal, and then they continue to agitate for funds that they then roll back into the company, apparently, but they don't have any financial transparency, apparently.
Sign the petition.
Allegedly, and they are like, and here's the thing, right? Like, Rebel Media is not just a news organization. They are, and they have not made any secret of the fact that they are also, an activist type organization. They have a very
stream complete? Oh, stream resumed. Okay, never mind.
Okay, they have a very distinct political agenda. They don't make any secret of it, right? And so it's not like they're Fox News and they're saying we're fair and balanced. They don't say they're fair and balanced. They say, here's our agenda. It's right here in the open. Sign this petition. Also, give us money if you want to see this, this, and this, right? And so, I mean, like, it's not the it kind of feels like an icky business model, but at the same time, like...
Well, if they do what they say they're going to do, don't give them money over and above what they ask for.
That's really the thing. I mean, like, they can ask all they want, and that's essentially,
Okay,
like,
that's the criticism that was sort of like, I'm like, yeah. I mean, essentially they said, well, they gather emails from their petitions and then they suck your money out. I'm like... What do you mean by suck your money out? Do you mean that they take your emails and somehow reverse engineer your financial info and then suck money that way? Or do you mean that they send you a message saying, give us money? And then you are so fucking weak-minded that you do it if that's not what you wanted to do. I mean, you're not weak-minded to give money because you're like, Rebel, I want to give you money. How do I give you money? I want to give you money. That's not, but if you're like, you open an email and it says, give us money. And then you're like, oh, well, this email has instructed me what to do with my life. So now I'm going to do it. That's not the Rebels' problem.
Yeah, no, I think the rebels obligated to do what they say they're going to do with the funds that they collect, but they don't, like, if they collect over and above what they what their targets were, they're free to roll that money back in. I mean, that's Solar frickin' Roadways was asking for what? How much? $600,000 fucking dollars or something like that, and they got $2.5 million, and still fucking
no fucking Solar Roadways.
Haven't revolutionized our highway system yet.
Okay, well, the
best work that Thunderfoot's ever done with Solar frickin' Roadways. Oh god,
yeah.
Okay, the one thing that I was like, one criticism that I was sort of like, yeah, that does, was the one where Ezra Levant was described as getting really aggressive with his staff.
That actually doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
At all. You ever see him in action? He's a fucking aggressive guy, right? He's an aggressive guy with an agenda.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's fine, but if you don't clean your room, get yourself sorted, as it were, then you can end up driving people away, which seems to have been what happened.
It seems to have been what happened, and like, honestly, I don't know enough about it, right?
Yeah, true enough.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of
vulturing going on.
There's a lot of unknowns too. Basically, the way I see it, if Gavin leaves, then it's over. I mean, it's over either way, because he's like the last good thing on that YouTube channel. So, because Faith is gone, Lauren Southern's gone.
When I said that thing I said about
all that's left now are a bunch of very, very Canadian people.
What I was saying is, hello, can you hear me? What I was saying was just that is the one legitimate criticism. I think that's legitimate on its face, as opposed to just dismissible because it seems like it might be a bunch of bumkus.
Yeah, well, might just be nitpicking and stuff. Yeah, no,
yeah, it might just be nitpicking.
And like I said, it would not surprise me if he was highly volatile and aggressive, within certain parameters. It would not strike me as weird. I've seen him in person speaking. I've seen what he's like when he's facing an antagonist. Absolutely. He's, if he thinks that somebody's actions or behavior or whatever is undermining his goals, he's like a little terrier. He's gonna fucking rip your throat out.
Although I have to say that this, as far as I can tell, the young woman who went to Charlottesville and rolled her eyes at protesters, I've read this several times. Is there more information as to why she had to be fired and everybody's going to beat her with sticks?
No idea.
Because so far, every one of her malfeasance seems to be a little bit less. I mean, yeah, sure, she went on the Daily Stormer, was it? But that doesn't mean she agrees with them.
You talking about?
I don't know who them. The young woman that Rebel fired.
Faith Goldie. Faith Goldie.
Yeah, Faith Goldie. Yeah.
Yeah. She interviewed some people from the Daily Stormer. I thought something like that. She interviewed them, and they fired her for that, supposedly. Yeah. Yeah,
Leverett. Okay, this is from the article.
She would have interviewed them, and then if the Daily Stormer had actually also taped the interview and had been like,
can we put that on our website? Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to put that. Well, they wouldn't have to ask permission to put it on the website. So
Levin's assertion came 2 days before the Rebel fired one of its prominent hosts, Faith Goldie, after she covered the protests in Charlottesville, live streaming herself, rolling her eyes at the participants in the countermarch just seconds before the car attack. So why is she responsible?
Because
timing.
Because she can see into the future. She knew they were going to die, and she thought, I'm going to give them an eye roll before this happens.
Yeah, no,
this is reaching really fucking far.
It's just really bad optics.
Goldie subsequently appeared. What doesn't matter is, I mean, it's something could happen to anyone. Like you could have been standing there.
I know, but that's why she got fired, is because it just doesn't look good.
Okay, so Goldie is it relevant to the next paragraph or the paragraph before? Goldie subsequently appeared on the Crypto Report, a podcast produced by neo-Nazi and white supremacist website, The Daily Stormer. Okay, so because Globe and News has told me that these people are neo-Nazis and white supremacists, I now know that they occupy a political spectrum starting from the church, hippies from the Church of Weed, all the way to Hitler himself.
Mm-hmm.
So where they are in that political spectrum,
well, you know,
can throw a dart.
Hitler's now recently reanimated brain that is currently in a steamboat machine somewhere in Charlottesville, plotting the next rally.
Yeah, but not being fed anything produced by Monsanto.
No, not at all.
No, apparently not. No, Monsanto's. Well, you know, GMOs. They wreak havoc on the newly resurrected flesh, resurrected by
pure Aryan flesh of
the
Hitler.
Newly reanimated necrotic flesh of Hitler, who was dug up right here in the USA. Apparently, that's where he was buried, and they put his brain inside of a machine that operates on white nationalism and the blood of the vaginal blood of the women who were operated on by that one guy who perfected gynecology, that made advances in gynecology by operating on slave women. Took their vaginal blood and then used it to animate the robot. Yeah, that's what I heard from the last
from CNN.
Yeah, from CNN.
Anyway, so I don't.
So it must be true.
I don't know why they're not taking my dog's vaginal blood right now. So.
Oh God! You really have to. Oh.
I
God.
did. I really had to go there. She's in heat.
Now I'm fucking nauseous. All right.
She's driving me fucking crazy.
Okay, so
she
Goldie
just wants to go outside every 2 minutes.
Okay, great. Goldie subsequently appeared on the Crypto Report, a podcast produced by neo-Nazi and white supremacists, which we don't know what that means anymore. Website The Daily Stormer. Although other sources would suggest that this is accurate. Is this accurate? I don't pay attention to this shit very closely. Is the Daily Stormer, where are they? Are they between... They're closer to Hitler? Are they closer?
The Daily Stormer is definitely, it's either a white supremacist Nazi website, or it is an FBI website that they use to lure in people who would be sympathetic so they can track them. It's one or the other.
Either way, though,
I've heard both.
Since the FBI is basically the police, and the police are basically right-wing Nazis too, it doesn't really matter.
Stormfront is the
Daily Stormer is moderate.
Stormfront are the people that Sargon calls storm fags, and he sends them interracial gay porn images on Twitter to piss them off. So,
all right, okay, so essentially, all right, so it's probably likely that they are. I'll trust Sargon over Globe and Mail, Global News. Okay, so at no point did I represent Rebel Media while on the ground in Charlottesville, and Levant said in her video announcing her departure that he discouraged her from going. Despite these statements, Goldie did file her video of the car attack on the Rebels website while she was in Charlottesville under her byline. Of her appearance on the Crypto Report, she acknowledged a poor decision. Okay, well, I mean, so what? She went on the Daily Stormer. She talked to the untalkables or whatever the fuck you want to call them. Doesn't mean that she agrees with them. Did she do a strip tease with like Nazi swastika like nipple tassels?
No, but I wish she had. It would have made it for an interesting
video.
I
was like, yeah, no, that would be.
I would watch that shit.
That would be pretty cool.
Zeke fucking hail.
You know, I honestly, I don't think she went and did a whole bunch of coverage in Israel last summer, I believe, right? So she did a whole bunch of stuff in Israel with the Palestinian thing and the stabbings going on there and the terrorist attacks and stuff, right? Her, Gavin McGinnis, Ezra Levant, a bunch of them, right, went there for, I don't know, 2 weeks or something and did a bunch of stuff, right? So I don't think that anybody could accuse her of being a neo-Nazi or anything like that. I think that, and I don't know, maybe she accepted the invitation to, have her be interviewed on a thing without really looking into it. That she wouldn't be the first person to go, sure, yeah, I'll talk to that person, right?
Well,
on their
like
podcast.
I said, we can't know anymore. If the media says someone's a Nazi or white nationalist, we don't actually know where they are on the spectrum between environmentalists against GMOs, hippies from the Church of Weed. I don't know, probably there's some Bernie supporters in there somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
There were
then all
Black
the way-
Lives Matter people in there.
There could be, there could be some black. This is on the spectrum considered Nazis by the corporate media. So that's basically a nonsense term at this point. Following the events in Charlottesville, Rebel co-founder Brian Lilliel and contributors Barbara Kay and John Robertson announced they were parting ways with company. With company, okay, what company? You didn't really specify.
I think they mean the company.
The company.
But they said with company, so I'm assuming that
okay.
this was at like an evening dinner party, and they were like,
Oh,
okay,
my
we're
God.
parting ways with company.
We will retire now
We will retire
to
now.
the smoking room.
All cited concerns about the rebels' editorial judgment has been in recent months included in the promotion of conspiracy theories, including those claiming that the shooter in a February mosque attack in Quebec City was Muslim, and sympathetic profiles of prominent alt-right figures, including Milo Yiannopoulos. Oh my God. What's wrong with a sympathetic no.
The Rebel can be sort of forgiven for jumping the gun on the Muslim thing. There were 2 people arrested after the attack on the mosque. One of them was Muslim.
Right? Okay, well,
Then CBC reported the names of the people involved, and Rebel Media kind of jumped on it and said, "See, it was Muslim and his accomplice. Maybe it was a Muslim and his accomplice doing a false flag. Who knows, right?"
Vice Media.
Sectarian violence or something.
This speaks to what Brian was talking about. Vice Media co-founder and former Fox News contributor Gavin McInnes will also depart the company, with Levant saying he was poached by a well-pocketed competitor. Okay.
Oh,
this is a thing.
He's going. Well, that's it. The Rebel's done.
It
doesn't matter whether they were right or wrong now. They lost all their best people.
No, but Rebel would say yes, he was pocketed by a deep-pocketed competitor or whatever. He was lured, right? But
can I not care about this a little bit?
No, but I mean, Gavin McInnes isn't going to say, "Yeah, I'm not going to do all the shows." He's not gonna say that. He's not gonna say, "Oh, well, I have this offer now, and now I just don't have time in my day, right, to keep with this other thing." No, if he left, it's because he wanted to leave.
Also,
am I a horrible person
for not caring? No, I don't think so. Actually, I don't think the drama or the stuff going on with the Rebel Media, their inner workings and people leaving and shit like that, I don't personally find that interesting, but the way that it's being covered by the media and the way they're because when I saw this break, when that guy made the video, my first thought wasn't, "Oh shit, what's going to happen to Rebel Media?" I was pretty indifferent towards it, but my thought was, okay, now what's the mainstream left-wing media going to use this for? How are they going to use this? Because they're going to. Because the Rebel Media, like a lot of other alternative media, whether it's right-wing, whether it's libertarian, whether it's just in the middle, whether it's just people trying to find the truth, they are the enemy of the corporate media, the mainstream media. They are the enemy of them. So whatever they can find, whatever they can use to discredit all other media sources except themselves, they will use. And so when this happened, that was my first thought, is how are they going to capitalize on this? Are they going to say, "Oh yeah, this is an alt-right news source, look at how corrupt they are, and I guarantee you this is everyone else." Everyone else, no matter how small they are, if you're not watching CNN, ABC, and MSNBC, CBS, whatever, Comedy Central, you're not getting the truth. And we have the truth because we're not corrupt like them, because look what happened to them, look what's going on over there, right? So that was the way in which that was my concern. And you can see that in the way that they're using language in this very article about the Rebel Media, despite, whether or not Ezra was doing damage control with his video and he actually had done some of the things that, they said that was actually something that is worth sort of criticizing, like the way he treated his employees or whatever. Whether that's true is not important to me as much as it is what the mainstream media is going to use it for in terms of discrediting everyone else, even people who don't like the Rebel Media that make their own content. You know?
Yeah, I mean, like us. Well, I mean,
Yeah, like
basically,
us.
we've been. I'm pretty sure that they're inching closer and closer to calling us Nazis or great weight drugs for Nazis. Well,
No,
I
they
guess,
already have. There was an article written about the Charlottesville rally and how men's rights activists. It was by David Futrell. So what do you expect? But how MRAs essentially drive.
David Futrell wrote his article. Then Amanda Marcotte picked it up on either Slate or Salon. I forget which one. Right.
Yeah,
and then there have been others.
Yeah, it was a Democratic Socialists of America website, which should tell you something. And they have an article that was, sorry, I got to look up the title real quick because it's on my Facebook page because it was cancer, and I always share cancer on my Facebook page. Men's rights activism is a gateway drug for the alt-right. It's from thecut.com. Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, no, and the Amanda Marcotte's article was, men's rights activism is the gateway drug to white supremacy or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, you're looking at, and this was one of the reasons why, actually, when Chris Cantwell reached out to me and said, would you like an interview? I'm going to turn myself in tomorrow, to the police. I was like, took me about 5 minutes to decide, right? And it was because I'd seen those articles already. And it's like, well, fuck.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's another Elliot Rodger thing all over again. Well, I didn't have the chance to interview Elliot Rodger. Maybe if I'd had the chance to interview Elliot Rodger, he'd have been like, I'd never heard of you guys before, or whatever, right? Like, yeah, no, like, I didn't read shit on your website. Whatever, right? Now, Chris Cantwell, he'd written, and he strikes me as a guy who, he picks up these radical movements. He's a little unstable. He picks up a radical movement. He squeezes all the juice out of it. Then when the excitement wears off or the inconsistencies emerge to the point where he can see them, he puts it down and picks up another radical movement. And that's sort of been his entire history. Is that. And so, he picked up the MRM for a while, he squeezed all the juice out of it, and then he moved on, right, to the next thing.
Maybe it was because the MRM wasn't really gynocentric enough. I think that, okay, let me be frank. It takes a lot of guts to stick around with this content if you're a man. And if you're a woman, too. Because it is fucking difficult content. Literally, it is questioning the very foundation of people's identities. It's sort of like being able to just sort of sit and have somebody constantly beat your knees with a baseball bat and be like, oh yeah, I can tolerate this. I'm okay with this business. Hurts like fuck, but I can do it. Or alternatively, how like martial artists like pound one of those boards to harden up their
bones
fists?
And yeah,
their bones or their shins. It's sort of like enduring that and just being okay with it, because it is a constant drum of pain, and it's a constant drum of questioning the foundation of your identity as a man or as a woman. Because we identify men in terms of their service, which by definition means that when they're vulnerable, they are outside of the identity granted to them by society. Very uncomfortable place to be. And women, in many ways, are defined by the value of their sex rather than their individuality. So when you start to question the goodness of your sex, or the ineffable goodness of your sex, like it's just part of what you are as a woman. That you're always right, that you're always moral. When you start to question that, you're questioning the identity, your identity. That's a really, like, it is hard to understate how painful it is to question the fundamental aspects of your identity. Tough, and how much endurance you have to be able to just continue with it. And I can see men who just can't hack it running away to something a little easier. And that would be an identity of service to an ism, or an identity of service to white women, or an identity of service to black women. Who the hell knows? There's an identity of service to women or utopia. I mean, I could see that, because it's much easier to try to relieve the shame by serving something as a man than it is to stay in that and face it. So, like I said, I don't think that the men's rights movement is necessarily a gateway the way they are presenting it, but I can see that men who are injured or vulnerable, who go into the men's rights movement because it resonates with them, just can't hack it and leave. And then they just go back to a place where they can deny their vulnerability or project it onto something else. Okay, I'm done.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. No. I think you're right. I think that essentially, you know, he is extremely gynocentric. You know, like and here's the thing, right? Like, there's the idea of sort of the ultimate equation that he was talking about in terms of individual reproductive value, right? And women having, any individual woman has more of that than any individual man, just on a basis of, you know, everything else being equal, because of the differential outcomes being so much more steep for men than for women, and all of those things, right? That sort of biological equation. And he's like, okay, let's base the society on that. That is perfectly fine with me. I'm going to prove my value. I'm going to prove that I'm worthy of, you know, even if it means I have to die to do it, right? And essentially, when you have a situation in the MRM where you're not willing to accept that, I think that that's probably what drove him away. So
that you're not willing to accept what again? Sorry, I was distracted by your dog.
We're not willing to accept the biological equation as the end of the story.
Well, why would you? I mean, there's plenty of evidence from history that isn't the end of the story. And I mean, even if we can't get rid of, and then, you know what? I don't even think it's a get rid of situation. I think that a lot of this desire to protect and provide for your family in men is just biologically innate. It's just something that's there. And what we really need to do is not exploit it excessively. And I think that there are precedents for encouraging cooperation over competition for men and creating extremely beneficial, diverse and virile societies by doing that. So but again, it does take, like, for an individual man, it does take a lot of guts. I wanted to say balls, but no offense.
Hey, that's ableist.
It takes a lot of
one ball should be fine.
Yes,
one should do it.
It takes a lot of ball to be able to just stick around and just live with it and just marinate in these ideas. It's like it's fucking difficult. And I'll be the first to tell you. You know what? I think we should end it here because my back is hurting. I need to sit down. Sorry, guys. No more. Besides, you guys weren't giving us super chats. By the way, there was one or two. There was another one. There was a second one.
I got it right here. Paul Azoparty gave us $10 Canadian. Thanks for the $2.50, dude. And he says, even the nearest flight school's college program has been infected by this shit. I have to go through a different route to get a proper job in aviation. I think he was relating it to social justice stuff. And I'm not surprised. It's in, like, all levels of education at this point. So
I'm going to be quite frank. I did a show on the Church of Women Worsting. And there was two factions originally, the right and left, and the right was about the family. You know, the best place for women to be in was the family. We got to fight the gays because gays are threatening the family. And that aspect of gynocentrism has been completely discredited. So we no longer have the women and children gynocentrism outside of Christian communities, which, you know, they still have their political power, Hobby Lobby, etc. But what really is becoming ascendant is this women and minorities form of gynocentrism, where the vulnerability of minorities is transferred to women instead of the vulnerability of children. And if you can understand it, I mean, it makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Like, the whole concept, the civil rights, it's all political. So when you want to start creating a movement that advocates for women politically, you're not going to take children's vulnerability. You're going to take the vulnerability of other identities, other political groups, minorities, gays, trans, etc., etc., etc. That's the vulnerability you want. And that's really what we're seeing, is that we're seeing the ascendancy of that particular church of women worsting.
Yep.
That particular church of let's center everything on making sure the women's are good, that they're okay, that they're provided and protected for. All right, that's all I have to say. We're going to be going to the after show. Sorry we didn't get through the letter, the article, but you should probably expect that by now. So if you want to join us in the after show, you got the drill, www.patreon.com/honeybadgerradio. If you really don't want to give through Patreon, you can always start up a subscription through Feed the Badger, www.feedthebadger.com. There's a subscription option. You can click it, and $5 will give you access to the after shows, at least the recorded after shows. $50 will give you, $100. Because Karen's on. Everybody loves Karen. Because she talks about her yard a lot.
She hasn't done that in a while.
Everybody loves Karen's yard. And her dog. She's probably not even listening to us anymore.
No, she's not. Her
wandered
yard
off.
It's like The Simpsons, when they used to do the thing where they would pan from like a lower floor to an upper floor, and they pass through the middle section, and you'll see like bones are buried, or the cat is stuck, or there's like a pirate treasure or something. That's what I think is underneath the surface of Karen's yard. It's like layers of things. It's like the sandbags, and then there's like old, like the bodies of soldiers or something, and maybe there's dinosaur bones, and there's like some kind of, Cthulhu Lovecraftian monster that's asleep. And if she keeps working, she's gonna somehow find these things. Anyway,
are we still talking about Karen's yard?
Yeah, we are. I was just adding some color to the.
No,
yard.
but I mean, we're not. This isn't like an illusion for something else.
No, I'm not heading anywhere else.
Something layered.
Letting things go.
Subterranean.
Shall we?
Full of bones.
Yeah.
Of her defeated enemies.
And of course, the necrotic flesh of Adolf Hitler and his reanimated brain.
Reanimated through the powers.
He's the one. He's the one controlling CNN and like.
What is it? Hash oil? Hashish oil?
It's all controlled opposition.
Marijuana oil.
Yeah, it's it's cannabis oil, because cannabis oil does everything: cures cancer, reanimates the dead. So.
But just as long as it's not GMO.
Right, as long as it's not Monsanto.
Because that will irritate the flesh of dead Hitler.
Of necrotic Nazis, yes.
Yes.
All right, so now should we go up?
I'm waiting for you to just hit the button. I'm
okay.
in pain. I've been saying stupid shit for the last 5 minutes, and you just you're not hitting it.
Okay, I'm hitting it. I'm hitting